Hello, Wisconsin. Welcome to the 11 o'clock hour of As Goes Wisconsin. I am your host, Kristin Bry. We got Jane Matnair on the board. We got Greg Bach here today. And our guest for this first half hour is none other than returning champion Alan Borsuk, who is a senior fellow at Marquette Law School and frequently still writes about education for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, where he was a veteran education journalist for a very long time. And we love to get his input on someone who has been reporting on schools and education in Wisconsin for most of your career. Is that a fair way to put it?
Dinosaurs roamed the earth when I started, I think.
And now you can, and now they study about them. But so welcome back. How are you, sir?
I am good. I'm really pretty good. How are you? That's what I want to know.
I'm impatient. As far as we are officially 2 weeks away as of today, and I'm feeling good though, feeling very good, feeling very lucky as far as the I have not reached that point where it's like, get this baby out of me now. So I think that's a good thing. So I wanted to bring you on because so often I feel like, especially when it comes to Milwaukee schools, there's a lot of discontent as far as NPS and the current status of, failing schools, failing kids who are not reaching their potential. And, and I think, as you said in your most recent article, for all that has happened on the Milwaukee area education landscape in the last 35 years, great results have been delivered too infrequently. Mediocrity, or worse, has continued unchanged when it comes to results in many schools. But you highlighted in this same article some examples of schools that are doing really well. And so I wanted to bring you on to talk about some of those and then talk a little bit about what is the common thread between them. And so to start with, you started with Reagan High School, which is an MPS high school, right?
Yes. Not a charter school or anything. It's a part of the regular system.
And so what do you see Reagan doing that this was the first school that you listed as a great example?
Well, Reagan is about 20 years old now, 21 years old. It started out as part of a Bill Gates Foundation funded small high school initiative, which nationwide was regarded as not successful, but there are success stories. And one of the things that happened with Reagan is it started out small, and they had a clear idea of what they wanted to do. They had very good leadership. They had a program that parents really wanted, which was an academic. They wanted the Rufus King of the South Side, is how one of them put it in the early days. They wanted a college prep school on the South Side to rival Rufus King on the North Side. And there was a market for it. They were doing what parents wanted, and that something that was good. So it began to grow. So suddenly it wasn't a small high school anymore. They're have 1,300 students now. They're putting on a more than $10 million edition because they were so crowded. I mean, this is the most successful development in MPS in the last 20 years, and they earned it by being good. I mean, good at what they do.
And so with that, because I think out of the 4 schools that you listed, that's the only public school that is not either private or a voucher school, right? Or charter?
As it happened, I wasn't setting out to be sector sensitive, but and I've heard of a couple more examples. I may do a second column. I mean, there are 1,000 reasons to be worried and pessimistic and to, just throw up your hands. The state of kids in the city overall is certainly alarming, but there are things that are being done well. Among other things, we all ought to be learning from them.
And so one of the other schools that you was the Notre Dame School of Milwaukee. And so what stood out to you about that school?
I was looking for places in this particular column that are growing and that are taking new steps and have earned, in my opinion, the right, shall we say, to grow because they're doing a good job. So Notre Dame started out also as a small voucher school, Catholic school, 15 years ago, I think. Expanded to 2 buildings. Now they're expanding to a 3rd building. They've earned high marks in the state report cards. They just run a really good ship. Is it a school for everybody? No, it's definitely straight line Catholic school. They separate boys and girls at early grades, but they do a good job and they're growing. Again, in a parental choice world, which really applies to every sector of schools in town, parents, there's a market for this. Parents wanted good schools for their kids, and Notre Dame has earned a place as being listed as one of them.
And so as far as it being a barometer of who's doing well, it
Yeah.
becomes that's instead of neighborhood schools, it's where do you want to go and who's willing to drive across town to get you to that school.
A neighborhood schools is such an interesting question. We could have a whole separate discussion on kind of, I wouldn't say the death of neighborhood schools, but it's a very weak idea in Milwaukee, and it has been probably since the start of bus-oriented school desegregation in 1976.
Is it that long that it's not been that neighborhood schools has kind of been
I would
on the
say so.
decline in Milwaukee?
I've argued with no data to prove this, but I'd love if someone, I tried to come up with a way of saying this more firmly, that the neighborhood school impulse is weaker in Milwaukee than I suspect in any other city in the country.
Oh, wow.
I grew up, you went to your neighborhood school. Everyone knew that. I know there were occasional exceptions, but they were rare. Now, something like 35% of kindergarten through 8th grade kids in the city of Milwaukee go to their neighborhood school. It's way under half.
Wow. Well, and that's probably another topic for another day,
Yeah,
as far as if that's a good
another
thing or a bad thing. But it is interesting. We're talking to Alan Borsuk, who is a senior fellow at Marquette Law School and frequently still writes about education for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And we're talking about some shining examples of schools that are doing it right or doing well in Milwaukee. And the next one, while not technically Milwaukee, it is Cudahy, which is just south of Milwaukee. And I remember we talked about this previously because Cudahy, prior to any legislation being passed at the state level, was already making the switch to what we've talked about most of the times that you've come on the show, which is switching from whole language, right? The whole language reading method to phonics, which now is where the state's headed again, right?
Well, correct. And it's a little bit broader than phonics, but phonics is the signature aspect of it, what's called the science of reading. And Wisconsin became something like the 32nd state in the country to pass a science of reading law that had some bipartisan support, not a ton, but enough that Governor Evers signed it. That was part of his deal for allowing Milwaukee City and Milwaukee County to have a sales tax, was agreeing to some other changes, and the reading bill came along with it. But Cudahy was in on this early, and the reason I am big on Cudahy is that they really had fairly weak reading scores. It's a community that's not, like a rich suburban haven, very much working class. A lot of changes in the demographic makeup of Cudahy in the last 20 years. The thing that I like the best is, number one, they are taking constructive steps to deal with a problem. That's actually fairly rare in school life and deserves praise. And number two, they're well led. And number three, they appear to have their act together as far as everyone being on board. Teachers are supportive, parents are supportive, the school board's supportive, and the district leadership, of course, is supportive. So they're really working hard at it. And that sense of we need to do better and we're going to do it constructively, again, that's way too rare. And I'm impressed with how they've done on that.
And then the final school that I want to talk about, and then when we come back from the break, I want to talk about what you see as the common thread. Like, is it just money? Is it leadership? Is it bold ideas? And where you see within the confines of school districts and bureaucracy and everything, like what can other schools learn? But then the one that you actually wrote the most about in this article was AUG Prep, which I mean, maybe it's because I don't have a kid of that age yet, but I had not heard of AUG Prep previously.
Oh, really?
It seems like
Okay.
no. And so tell us more about that school.
Well, it's an amazing story, and whether you love it or hate it, and there's certainly people in both camps, it's controversial. Gus Ramirez, the founder, is controversial. He's the head of a Waukesha-based high-tech business called Husco. Obviously, made a lot of money, and driven by Gus and his family. They created the school only 6 years ago. They opened, so it's quite young still. It's grown very rapidly. It, as of this fall, is the largest single site school in the Milwaukee area with about 1,800 students, pushing 1,900 students. It's going to grow some more. And they've had great success. Number one, attracting people. Number two, academic success. Number three, some of the things I look for in a school: stability in staff, stability in student enrollment, high attendance, and high scores on the state report card. They had 5-star scores the last 2 years of report cards. And what's some of the traits? Number one, strong leadership. Number two, clear ideas of what they're doing and clear attention to it. Number three, and I've talked with them about this, a willingness to look at what are our weak spots and how do we address them. When we see there's a problem, third grade math isn't going very well, what are we going to do about it? That kind of thing. Certainly they've had the benefit of money, because the Ramirez family particularly has poured tons of money into it. The first building they built was probably over $50 million. They opened a second building next door now that's almost $50 million. And they're taking over the Cardinal Stritch campus on the north side.
Oh, that's why I've heard that name before.
Which is a whole nother really ambitious idea that'll take years to unfold.
Well, we have to go to a break, so I want to keep talking about this on the other side of what you kind of see as the common thread. Like you said leadership, you said money, and what kind of schools can do with one, with the other, with both, with neither, to try to improve their standing. So our guest is Alan Borsuk. Come back after the break. This is As Goes Wisconsin. You better get me to school on time. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristin Bry, along with Greg Bach and Jane Matnair, and we are talking to Alan Borsuk, who is a senior fellow at Marquette Law School and writes about education for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And we're talking about what schools are, in at least in the Milwaukee area, are really doing well. They're growing. Their tests are good. The grades are good. The achievement levels are good. And we talked through some of the highlights of the schools that you had written about in your most recent article. But I kind of want to talk about what you see as the common thread. And I guess the first question is, how much, because there's so much talk about money when it comes to school funding. There is obviously, do public schools have enough? There is still anger from some as far as how much voucher schools are now going to get in this new budget. But how much do you feel like successful schools need to have adequate, or if not more money to be successful?
It's not a simple question.
Okay.
You'd like to make it a simple question, but there's so much evidence from around the nation that, and around here as well, that you can spend a lot more money and get not very good results. So there's more to it than just money. Do schools need money? Yes. Do schools, especially at the moment, the public schools, are they being stretched and stressed? Absolutely. Did they do well in the state budget? No, not really. The voucher and charter schools did way better in this budget. And the balance of power and initiative and energy between the sectors is changing in a way that is much more attractive to the non-traditional public schools. So that's all. It does all involve money. But if you're looking for success, you got to have more than money. You have to have resources. That's a fact. A sense of limited satisfaction constantly, that you can't just rest on your laurels, even if you're doing pretty well. And that's fairly rare. A sense of, let's address our problems effectively. That's a really important trait. A sense of not putting up with mediocrity, which too many schools kind of say, oh, well, we made it through today. Strong teachers, strong principals of school leaders. I mean, for principals as far as ideals also, a real focus on the facts of whether are our kids doing as well as they ought to, and what are we going to do about it. these are intangibles. But, you know, if you talk about AUG Prep, they got lots of money.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing. But they also have that strong, competent leadership and that sense of how do we do better? How do we connect with kids? How do we get students on the paths to success? What help do they need, including intangibles like social emotional stuff? You know, it's not just about learning the reading and math and science. So that the intangibles are also really important. You know, I could name schools around here where you give them a ton more money and you're not going to get any better results.
And is that, because I think that's kind of the question as far as what is, when we think about some of the voucher schools, charter schools that they don't have the bureaucracy of the school district. How much, having never worked in education, and only reading things from the outside, like how much handcuffs do MPS leaders as far as principals of individual schools, like how much leeway do they have to really take charge and like turn their school around versus things that are kind of like school district wide that are just hard to overcome? Another hard question.
Yeah, no, well, there's no one answer. And in different periods, there's been different results. That at times there's been a much looser central control, and at times there's been much more restrictive central control. These days, I think school principals don't have as much freedom to pick their programs and to lead, you know, to be a maverick as in some prior eras. Frequently, it's been the Mavericks who ran the best schools in MPS. Going back like 25 or 30 years ago, there are not very many Mavericks in that system now. Frankly, if you're a Maverick, you go somewhere else. There's been times, and we're kind of in that now, where every school is expected to be on the same page in the same textbook, you know, every day. And that has advantages in that, but it does sort of sap creativity and drive for a lot of employees. It's a big battleship, and getting it to change directions is not easy. That's just one of their many problems, unfortunately.
So I guess with the 2 minutes that we have left, I guess, what are you looking forward to, not only with these like certain schools that are doing well, but knowing, like we said, there's a new budget, there's new reading legislation. Like, what are you looking for and things that you're looking forward to writing about in this upcoming school year?
Well, that's a good question. I have cut back, I should say, on how much I'm writing for the newspaper, just because I'm old and cranky and worn down. The balance of power between the non-MPS or non-public school sectors and the public school sectors is really important to watch. As things evolve with the new reading law, that's important to watch. The whole politics, especially in the suburbs, the politics of what's going on, and issues that are important and valuable, but nonetheless, oftentimes not really central to how kids are doing in school. I wish parents and teachers and everybody was focused more on how do we get better outcomes for our kids. So those are the kind of things I'm watching.
Some little things, just
little
details.
But those are also often the ones that school districts don't focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Alan Borsuk, always a delight to have you here. I will see you when I get back from maternity leave. Jane and Greg will probably have you back while I'm gone, but have a great day and always appreciate having you here. We're going to take a break. When we come back, what are the worst mistakes in television history? We want to hear from you. 844-967-2789. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bride. Jane Nair is on the board. Greg Bach is here. And let's get away from the politics. Let's get away from schools. Let's have some fun and talk about the worst decisions in TV history.
So this article came across my viewing eyes. The 50 worst decisions made in television. An article posted by Rolling Stone, and it basically goes through 50 the top 50 worst decisions ever made in television. I scrolled through it, and what I thought I would do is I'd start with one. I'm not going to do all 50, of course, because 50, that's a long time. That's a whole show.
It's time.
Yeah, because time.
Yeah, the time thing.
But all I did was from the 50th, I looked at the one that hit my eyes, the first one, and that was number 49, which was America's Next Top Model asked contestants to swap ethnicities.
What year did that happen in?
It wasn't the 20s, or the 2020s. So it's exactly what it sounds like. In 2005, the contestants were asked to swap ethnicities, which meant that some of the white models wore blackface and others changed their skin tone, wore wigs, as if to look like if they were Native American, Hawaiian, or Latinx. This, of course, it says here took place in social media. I think Facebook was probably the only one. We weren't about like what we're on now. That mean this would get a person fired for even.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, this would never happen now. Because also on America's Next Top Model, didn't Tyra Banks put on like no, I think that was her talk show.
Her talk show. She put on a fat suit.
She put on a fat suit and like existed as a fat person, and like it was supposed to be very revelatory.
Yeah, and people were like, "Are you Tyra Banks?" No, I'm not. And she says she has defended the move in recent years. She didn't want to do blackface, but she wanted to see how people would deal with being a degraded race. And I'm like,
is that the term she used? Was a degraded race?
Let's see here. She said, degraded my race. Sorry, degraded my race. But yeah, it's still just take the L, Tyra. Just take the L. And you know what I'll do is I won't go into big explanation on some of them, but I'll just say this. Don't forget, folks, that the Geico Cavemen commercials got their own TV show at one point, got canceled in less than one season. That was pretty cool.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's what, in going through this list, how many I was like, I don't remember that happened. But we would love to hear from you of what sticks out to you as really bad TV decisions, either because it was like, ooh, that did not age well, or because the studio or the network lost a ton of money. 844-967-2789. And I think we got Joe from Appleton on the phone.
Hey, Joe.
Hello, lovely people. Greg.
So good morning. Joe, what do you think is the worst TV decision in history?
I tell you this, my wife and I were very big fans of How I Met Your Mother. I think in many ways it was a spiritual successor to Seinfeld. That's a whole nother discussion. But I tell you this, it started to wane in later seasons, but most shows do. But then it gets to the last season. They completely changed the setting from New York to some resort in New England. They changed the format, so the whole season, 20 some odd episodes, takes place over one weekend. And I mean, that just totally threw off the game, what it had been used to so far. Then they get to the season finale. I'm thinking, all right, this better pay off. And I think with the season finale, or the series finale for How I Met Your Mother, the writers just gathered in a room and said, hey, you know what would be funny? If we did the equivalent of grabbing our audience by their big dumb faces and screaming, F you! Because they undid everything. They undid everything that they had set up to that point, pulled the rug out from under everybody's feet, and everybody hated it. Now, I can usually go back and watch old shows that kind of fell off and enjoy the good times. But with this, it was so bad, it spoiled the entire series, such that now when I see a rerun come on, all I can think of is, oh, you monsters. The seventh layer of hell is reserved for thee.
Boy, Joe, don't get dramatic or anything.
I get passionate about certain
so
things.
I have to ask then, because the other show that always pops up for me, the other missed, botched endings. I feel like I wasn't a Lost fan, but how Lost ended always gets listed as a terrible ending. And that's on this top 50 list. And then the other one is the entire season, entire last season of Game of Thrones. So do you have strong feelings about those, Joe?
I never watched Lost. I haven't kept up with Game of Thrones. I do hear that there are some, albeit a small minority, of defenders of the Lost season finale. I've not heard one person I have not heard one person say How I Met Your Mother ended fine. And if they do meet that person, I know they're an alien.
All right.
Very much
thanks so
so.
much for the call, Joe. But that's what I think is interesting. Greg, did you watch Lost?
I watched the first season. I watched the first 2 episodes I was dating a woman at the time. She's like, please just watch Lost with me. I thought, all right, I'll watch the pilot. And the pilot was 2 episodes. And as soon as it was done, I was like, thank you. I'm done with this now.
You're like, I'm not
But
interested. Was it like the fantasy stuff or why didn't you get into it?
no interest whatsoever. And here I will say this. My sister is a fervent, diehard defender of everything Lost, to the point where one time I was going to say something about Lost just in like, hey, I watched it, whatever. I wasn't going to criticize it. And she like jumped at me. She's like, don't you ever say anything bad about Lost or I'll make fun of Doctor Who. I'm like, I wasn't going to make fun of it. I just didn't care. Like, there are fervent defenders of that show.
And I loved the show until they ruined it with the end.
At the end.
And even the last season, and it was very confusing and very convoluted to begin with. But the last season was all over the place, and the finale didn't answer so many intrinsic questions that had been part of the series from the beginning. Anybody who knows what smoke monster means will understand what I'm talking about.
Well, here's a question I have for the both of you. Do y'all remember a little show called Cop Rock?
Oh,
I don't.
Yeah.
I have
I
no
do.
idea what Cop
I'll give
Rock
you a
is.
very quick overview. Legendary show creator Stephen Bochco wanted to make a Hill Street Blues into a Broadway musical. Everyone said no. So he said, you know what? I'm just going to make a cop show where throughout the show there are full dance and singing numbers based on various things that go on in a cop's life. It is so awful. There is a song where a guy sings about how he can kidnap you a child. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous. The show was like, basically it got canceled as the first episode was being aired because they realized how hard they had failed on this one.
So wait, but was it Stephen Bochco? I'm reading this
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
So it was
Yes.
Oh, like so it went like it was a real hard left turn into
yeah. He's like, I just want everyone to dance.
Man, I don't remember that show at all, but that is really funny. We're talking about the worst TV decisions of all time. Could it be shows that were created, shows that were canceled, people that were fired, botched endings? 844-967-2789. We got Carmela from Milwaukee on the phone. Carmela, what is the worst TV decision of all time?
It has to be Game of Thrones.
The ending, the last
whole
season?
last season. Yeah, just everything Bran King, and just a couple episodes before he was named king, he's like, I can hold no titles, and and then all of a sudden he's like, why do you think I came all this way to be crowned king? It was just so ridiculous, the whole last season. There were so many more.
I have to agree with you as far as like the investment of millions of people for well over basically over a decade, right? And like the intricacy and the details for so many seasons, and then like, let's just wrap it up. We're over this. And it's like how the last season felt.
Yeah, those two guys should.
Yeah, and I guess HBO offered to go longer so they could wrap it up, but the showrunners are the ones who decided, no, let's just kind of do it here.
The only thing I'm sorry, Carmela. The only good thing about the last season of Game of Thrones was I liked that the youngest daughter killed the Ice King.
But that whole war should have been a whole season.
Yeah, the whole war could have been a whole season.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it did come out of nowhere. They were setting it up that it would most likely be somebody else, probably Jon Snow, and then she came out of nowhere. So
yeah,
I enjoyed that it was her, but at the same time, I was still kind of like, what? Wait.
But also,
So
and also like. I
I
know. And the fast development of Daenerys and the Mad Queen. It's like that was like you loved her for like 7 seasons until all of a sudden you're supposed to not love her. Like I totally agree with you, Carmela.
Yeah.
It just made me mad. And then she got that look And then she just destroyed the whole city, you know, and she's talking about breaking the wheel, and then they turned it. And I was like, no, every time I do rewatch it and it makes me mad every time.
All right. Thanks so much for the call, Carmela. I have to agree with you that is up there, especially because there were so many people invested in it that were let down. Let's go to Charles in Green Bay. Charles, what was the worst TV decision of all time?
Putting on Housewives of Anywhere.
Yay, Charles! Yay!
Housewives of New York, or Housewives of Dallas, or Housewives of Penang Junction, or Housewives of Poughkeepsie, or whatever. Why do we give a damn about their show? Why do we give a damn about what's going on with their life? The other fact of the matter is Keeping Up with the Kardashians. That one should have been canceled before it even got started.
I know Jane agrees with that one.
But the thing is that
I'm sorry, but Jane and I are in the mode of sarcasm today.
Charles, Charles, I'm in the mode of sarcasm every day. But you and I and Cindy are going to have to get together and go drinking, because I think we'd have a ball.
Go drink it in the Fox Valley, Appleton, Green Bay.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the call, Charles.
Yep, bye.
Oh, bye. Sorry, I couldn't hear him. Greg, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, while those are terrible shows, those shows made billions of dollars, so those aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, quality doesn't necessarily popularity does not equate quality.
But speaking of billions of dollars and billions of dollars lost,
Can we say the same time?
Well, I'm going to say the fact that this is like super, I think it's top 10 on the list, but the fact that NBC canceled Baywatch after the first season. Talk about a bad business decision. That's on this list. And if you think about the millions, if not billions of dollars Baywatch has made since, but the fact that NBC had it for the first season and then we're like, nah.
Well, we're fine. I was going to say my $1 billion thing was when they launched Quibi in 2020.
What was Quibi?
Exactly.
I didn't even want to bring it up because I knew so many people. It was such a failure to launch that like I was living in Los Angeles at the time and I was like trying to actively get a meeting with Quibi executives to try to pitch a show, but I was not famous. So they weren't taking anyone who wasn't already famous because they had Chrissy Teigen. Like every celebrity had these like 10-minute shows lined up that Quibi was going to be the next big thing. And and it was basically literally they were going to launch. The pandemic happened and TikTok started and everyone's like, oh, here's a bunch of free content I can get on my phone. Why would I subscribe and pay for 10-minute episodes? And it just literally, what was it, Greg? 1.75 billion?
1.75 billion. It started in April and ended in December, the same of 2020. But I was also going to lump that in with CNN Plus, which launched and canceled and went away within a month. I mean, it was crazy how much money was spent on these things and they're gone.
All right. Well, we got to take a break, but 844-967-2789. What are the worst TV decisions of all time? We'll come back with your texts and your calls, and we'll also let you know who's at the Laughing Tap this weekend. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristin Bry, along with Jane Matnair and Greg Bach, and we've been talking about the worst TV decisions of all time, according to we saw this from Rolling Stone printed a piece about this, but we've also been taking your calls and texts on what you think is the worst TV decision of all time.
Charles from Green Bay called back and he wanted to add Fox News parting way with Tucker Carlson
is the worst decision of all time.
Well, I mean, certainly.
I disagree with that.
But their ratings took a big hit when he left.
I haven't.
But it was great for us.
Well, and it's just the whole landscape. But what would you say as far as what did you? We'll end on this. Do you agree with what number one was on the list?
Let me see here. My computer is not loading well in this article because it's a very long page. Yeah, no, I don't agree with this. Well. So number one is NBC cancels Freaks and Geeks. It was a beloved show. It was an underground show. This is not number one to me.
Because I
At
agree
all.
with you, because I think their number 2 should have been number 1.
Yeah, and their number 2 is NBC turns Donald Trump into a television titan, which, yeah.
Absolutely.
That I think has a much more grander impact on the scope of history than Freaks and Geeks getting canceled.
Absolutely. But the one I did notice, number 8, which is HBO, TNT, Showtime, FX, all turned down Breaking Bad.
Wow.
I mean, you just have to imagine being the person who says, it's like the person at Decca Records is like, yeah, we don't want the Beatles. We're fine. The Guitar Rock is going out. It's fine. They won't be anywhere in a year.
We do have a couple texts as well. Mark from the SAC, Fox's cancellation of Firefly. Another one coming in from the 608. Worst TV decision, Fox canceling Firefly before all episodes had aired out of order. Another one for Firefly. And then
wow. I need to watch this show, or maybe not, because I won't be satisfied, apparently.
It's a really good show.
And then fun fact, Sheryl Crow sang a song on Cop Rock. We recently found it on YouTube. I'll have to see if I can find it, and I'll pull that for tomorrow.
Sheryl Crow sang on Crop Rock. Well, some of the other ones I thought were interesting is when Norm Macdonald got fired from SNL, but also David Spade and Chris Farley getting fired from SNL.
Mhm.
Chris Farley, I didn't realize they had fired him.
Yeah, they fired all 3 of them because they were just getting too big, too much money. Chevy Chase gets his own talk show that last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the one that broke my heart the most is the people who played the Ropers on Three's Company got their own spinoff, and there was a thing in their contract saying if the show didn't last a season, they could come back. But when they left, they introduced Don Knotts' character, and the Roper show lasted a year and a half. So when it got canceled, they weren't allowed to come back, and they lost their jobs. That's just some nasty Hollywood stuff, in my opinion.
Welcome to the entertainment business.
Yep.
Well, that was super fun. I will link the article from Rolling Stone to today's show notes, so you can go check out and see which ones you agree with, which ones you forgot about, and which ones you think should have been on there, or what order. But that was super fun, and also super fun is going to the Laughing Tap.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, have some comedy, right?
Stab comedy. I'll stab comedy with you. And if you stab comedy this weekend, you might see Dan Schaefer, because Dan Schaefer told me he's coming to a show this weekend. So yeah, baby.
So fun.
But we have Louis Katz coming to the Tap for 5 shows. Thursday, 2 Saturday, 2 Friday. Tickets are available, laughingtap.com. Very funny New York comic coming all the way out here. Finally get to see him. Very excited to see him. Jay, we got a clip?
We do.
I had this hippie roommate for a while. Her name was Juggle Sticks. She was super annoying. She insisted everything she bought had to be organic. She actually used, instead of a regular chemical-based deodorant, she used a crystal for deodorant. Anyone heard this before? Yeah? Yeah, you know how it works? Yeah, doesn't, all right? She stunk, right? The crystal didn't summon some kind of bio fairy who magically made her pit smell like rainbows. She was a vegetarian who magically smelled like lamb shawarma, okay? It was disgusting. And it made me hungry. Freaked me out. One day, Juggle Sticks found a cat in the dumpster, brought him home, named him Dave Meowthews.
So yeah, Louis will be here 5 shows at the Laughing Tap. Thursday, 2 Saturday, 2 Friday, laughingtap.com.
Nice. Tickets are a steal.
Tickets are a steal, $20, no drink minimum. And then also, if you can't come to those shows, Sunday, Keg Stand-Up returns to Lakefront Brewery. That show is 6:30. There's a full menu before the show. Got 4 great comics from the region, Milwaukee and Chicago comics coming through for the Keg Stand-Up show. Those tickets are available at milwaukeecomedy.com. That's our other company. And then finally, if you love comedy and if you want to meet me how Kristin, Bry, and I met years ago, you can volunteer for the Milwaukee Comedy Festival. We're looking for volunteers right now. Volunteers get to come to shows. It's not a lot of work, just helping out. You might be asked to drive. If you have a car, that'd be great, because we have people doing things like running some errands if we need it. But go to mkecomedyfest.com/volunteers. Also, volunteers link is on the front page of mkecomedyfest.com.
That's an awesome idea, and a great way to meet people and make some friends and check out the comedy scene in Milwaukee. That's terrific.
I would highly, not just because I got a friendship out of it, but as far as volunteer gigs go, you like basically collect tickets and you tell people where to go if they're coming
Yeah.
into like the Dandy or something like that, because you got to go sneak through the back. And but you get to see a free comedy show, you get to meet new people. It is very fun. I would highly recommend volunteering. It's like, it's like the people who couldn't get a Taylor Swift concert ticket, so then they just got jobs as security guards at stadiums. It's like basically the same thing.
Exactly. With less teenage girls.
Yes.
So,
Yes, exactly.
Yep, we got lots of stuff happening, and yeah, come on down, high five, and it'll be awesome.
All right. Well, a little bit of a rough start today, but we made it through. I think
Do you know why? Because we're
Why?
professionals.
We are professionals. Specifically Jane.
Well, and we have a team of engineers, and everybody pitches in when things go awry. So thanks for everybody's help today, including Calvin and everybody.
Yes. Thank you
Casper and Corey and Drew and Brian and everyone.
And thank you to everyone at home who let us know that, hey, something's wrong. I would have kept just talking, and everyone would have been like, why is there no talking on the air? So
Jane and Greg are having a weird conversation.
Yeah. So thank you so much for everyone who called in and texted today. Thank you to Alan Borsuk. Thank you, Greg Bach. Thank you, Jane Madnair. We will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. We got a new public service announcement. Paul Noonan will be here. So yeah, come back tomorrow, 10 a.m. This has been As Goes Wisconsin.